My consuming lust was to experience their bodies. I viewed them as objects, as strangers. It's hard for me to believe a human being could have done what I've done. Doesn't that just creep you out? You'll recognize these spine-chilling remarks if you've seen this Netflix series. These distressing remarks from Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, a controversial new series based on a true story that has been making the news since it aired on streaming platform on September 21st, 2022. Dahmer, created and written by Ryan Murphy and Ian Brennan, follows serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, played by Evan Peters, as he murders men and young boys between 1978 and 1991. Welcome back to Just Crime, where we tell you the craziest stories. Are you ready? Let's begin. This is the one Netflix show that has everyone's attention right now. Do you want to know why? This isn't just a fictional crime series, it's based on a real story. Jeffrey Dahmer was a real person who terrorized the United States from 1978 to 1991 with his heinous actions. He was known as the Milwaukee Cannibal or the Milwaukee Butcher and was the most wanted serial killer in the United States. Over a 13-year period, he killed 17 men and boys, engaged in sexual misconduct, and consumed human flesh. Did our mention of cannibalism make you think of Dr. Hannibal Lecter? The Jeffrey Dahmer story is real, whereas that was entirely fictional. Netflix's Dahmer is under further criticism, this time from the journalist who broke the real-life Jeffrey Dahmer story. Some have applauded the show for taking a more critical look at how the Milwaukee Police Department failed to catch Dahmer, resulting in the murders of a large number of black males. Dahmer illustrates the racism, homophobia, and other issues that permitted Dahmer to commit killings for more than 10 years. The Milwaukee boy's life is painstakingly chronicled in this series, which jumps back and forth between the day he was exonerated and his former years as a toddler and a teenager. Dahmer's instructors remembered him as a timid and quiet as a child. He is also said to have had abandonment issues as a child because both of his parents were inaccessible for a long portion of his youth. Apart from insecurities, Dahmer was said to have normalized violence at a young age after witnessing his parents arguing violently every now and then. He knew he was gay when he entered puberty and kept his sexual orientation hidden from his parents. If you watch the show, you'll see that Dahmer's inability to accept his identity publicly arises from the fact that he comes from a homophobic household. Dahmer is seen masturbating with a phony male figure in one of the show's scenes and gets discovered by his grandmother, who reminds him that that's a bad thing to do. She subsequently tosses the figure away and informs a visibly upset Dahmer about it. During his adolescence, Jeffrey Dahmer was also an alcoholic. He apparently began drinking to cope with his parents' tumultuous relationship at home. His drinking problem was also the reason he was thrown out of the military later in life. Jeffrey Dahmer committed his first murder after graduating from high school. What began as a sexual fantasy evolved into planned killings and then cannibalistic behavior. Dahmer was fascinated with the anatomy of dead animals, including their bone structure, ever since he was a child. In fact, in one of the show's sequences, Dahmer is seen telling a therapist how seeing victims inside parts makes him sexually excited. Later, after discovering he was gay, he fantasized about having a man-subservient companion. His dreams finally led to dissection, and the rest of his history, as they say. America witnessed the most infamous silent serial killer. Don't even think about it when Jeffrey Dahmer offers you something to drink or you'll miss out on the drama. Subscribe to the channel and like the video for more updates. When Jeffrey Dahmer was finally apprehended in 1991, he confessed to authorities to a total of 17 slayings. Dahmer was convicted of 16 murders and condemned to life in prison a year later. He was assassinated in 1994 while serving a life term in jail. People have criticized Dahmer for once again romanticizing Jeffrey Dahmer's killings after its release. One victim's family member complained about not being informed prior to the show's broadcast, and she described the whole thing as Netflix's approach of making money out of his tragedy. And now, the original journalist who broke the story of Jeffrey Dahmer's killings is speaking out about the new Netflix series' inaccuracies, as well as a recounting chat that she had with Dahmer himself. Dahmer, Monster, the Jeffrey Dahmer story, a buzzworthy new true crime series on Netflix, begins with an episode that plays out like a horror movie. Dahmer prowls a nightclub largely populated by young black men. He approaches a trio of clubgoers and persuades one of them, Tracy Edwards, to accompany him home. Dahmer promises Edwards a paid photo shoot, but when they return to his flat, he drugs him before holding him at knife point and informing him that he'll eat his heart after killing him. Their cat and mouse game develops with increasing dread. It's difficult to predict when or if Dahmer will strike with that knife. The tide turns when Edward fights his way to the front door and escapes. When he sends dubious cops to Dahmer's house, they discover the killer's ever-expanding house of horrors, including a vat full of body parts and severed skull in the freezer. We're nearing the end of Dahmer's evil rampage, but that terrifying opening sequence defines the series' essence. Anne E. Schwartz, a crime writer for the Milwaukee Journal at the time, was among the first to arrive at the Oxford apartments where Dahmer committed the majority of his murders. She has received a phone call from the police source stating that human remains had been discovered inside an apartment. She remembered seeing the police figure out the scope of Dahmer's atrocities after uncovering Polaroids of his victims. She authored 2 books based on her reporting and on the Dahmer killings, and she told The Independent that Dahmer does not bear a great deal of resemblance to the facts in this case. When people see Ryan Murphy's Netflix series and think, "Oh my god, this is terrible," I want to remind them that it didn't always turn out that way, she told the outlet. Glenda Cleveland's status as Dahmer's direct next-door neighbor was one of the inaccuracies that Schwartz couldn't get beyond with Dahmer. Glenda is shown in the program making many attempts to warn the authorities of Dahmer's murders whilst living next door to him. Glenda Cleveland knocks on the door in the first opening 5 minutes of the episode. None of this occurred, according to Schwartz. I struggled with buy-in because I knew it wasn't true. People, however, are not watching it for that purpose. They are watching it for enjoyment. Glenda Cleveland actually lived in a separate building at the Oxford apartments, according to Schwartz. Aside from criticizing the dramatizations in Dahmer, which is unsurprising given that it's a true crime TV show, Schwartz documented her own interview with Jeffrey Dahmer following the publication of a 1991 book, The Man Who Could Not Kill Enough. Schwartz stated that Dahmer called her quite quickly after several psychiatrists she dealt with blamed his conduct on his parents. For someone who didn't express any emotion or appear to care about anything, she recalled, he was incredibly protective of his parents, especially his mother. His voice lacked intonation. He was so bland, like vanilla. There was nothing there. He simply stated that no one but himself was responsible for what he did. Schwartz concluded her interview by saying that the performance is difficult not only for the victims' families, but also for the people of Milwaukee, who still consider it as a terrible blot on the city and don't want people to think about it. After Dahmer's killings became public, she even described how individuals would frequently visit the Oxford apartment in search of mementos, with some attempting to take the bricks and chunks of the earth after the flats were demolished. The abandoned lot is still closed off to this day. Ms. Schwartz stated that Dahmer was highly crafty in his victim selection. He would only converse with them at length in bars and on the street in order to prey on men on the outskirts of society whose disappearances would go unnoticed. This, combined with the gruesome body disposal methods, allowed him to get away with murdering 17 boys and men before his crimes were exposed. Furthermore, victims of the crime in Milwaukee's LGBT community in the early 1980s and the early 1990s rarely reported crimes to police for fear of being outed to family or employers. But why do we need to recreate and profit from these murders in order to feel empathy for Dahmer's victims, especially when said victims were primarily LGBTQ+ men of color? It's the same question that some of Dahmer's real-life victims' families are asking today. Rita Isbell, the sister of victim Errol Lindsay, told Insider that neither Netflix nor the show's creator contacted the families before their personal traumas were reenacted again for rating's sake. It's horrible that they're just profiting from this tragedy, she remarked. That's just plain greed. We might never be able to escape the actual crime phenomena. However, we must approach these experiences with self-awareness and genuine, rather than fake, empathy. We must be forthright about the repercussions of repeating true tragedies. Above all, we must respect the wishes of the family most affected by these murders. That is how true humanizing appears. And that is all for today. For more such videos, check out our YouTube channel.